So Brad and I are going to the NCS show, and I arrive about 4 or 5 hours earlier than Brad. We're splitting a hotel room to save a couple bucks. And because I arrive earlier and because I'm me, I take a moment and I get the hotel room all nice. I unpack my bags. I had brought 3 or 4 magazines. So I fanned them out as one does with one's poker hand. You know, I fan them out on one little table. I put out my Wacom One. I put out my sketch pad. I've got things arranged on the... And about 4 hours, and then I'm like, oh, this is nice. And the hotel looks nice. I open the windows. I have it all pleasant. Brad comes in about 4 hours later. Shoulder bag gets thrown on the little side table. Other suitcase gets dropped. Jacket comes off and gets thrown across the room. And he literally, gang, like you do with your forearm, he does a forearm swipe across the whole table of stuff that I had set up so pretty and just flops down on the couch and be like, so what's new with you? And I'm like, wait, what was all that? I had this hotel room all nicely set up, and Brad came in like a tank, just a bat out of hell. But it was the forearm swipe of like just a moment that like having a moment and clearing off a whole table for no good reason. That I was like, what was all that about?
What the fuck? I was like, what the fuck are these doing here? Just get them out of my way, you know. It was unbelievable. I walked in and there's number one, the windows are open. Who does that? Number two, I'd never seen anybody use the hangers in the little wardrobe that they give you in the hotel room. Like I just take stuff out of the suitcase, put it on, and walk out the door. He's got stuff hanging. He's got stuff sorted by colors, and then the magazines. Which, honest to God, if you would have told me that those had been artfully arranged, I would have taken a moment to appreciate them before I swiped them. But they were just in the way. Is where they were. I had stuff I needed to set down, and I remember distinctly moving it out of the way, sitting down, and by the way, that was all accurate, and asking Dave how he was doing, and I watched just the color draining out of his face, like I had just kicked a puppy.
Because he cleared all my beautifully arrayed table display. He wipes it away. Oh. I don't even know what you needed the room for. Did you have like a giant Slurpee from 7-Eleven you had to put down?
I had stuff I needed to put down.
What classy item did you have to put down on my table that I had so artfully arranged? And you're like, I need this space, brah.
And such important works of publication as well. I think there was a AAA guide there. There was so you're new to the city, Sailor, that magazine. It was all kinds of the dumbest magazines I'd ever seen in my life. It was what is this doing here?
All to make way for Brad's 48-pack of Slim Jims that he had to put down on the table.
That did not go uneaten. By the way, they were not untouched virgin Slim Jims.
No, you polished them off. You sure did. On that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of Comic Lab, the show about making comics.
And making a big deal about nothing. Living from comics, I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, who artfully arranges a hotel room only to find it destroyed in moments. I'm the cartoonist of Drive in Sheldon and the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped.
Honest to goodness, my friends, he was going to stay behind and show housekeeping how to do it right next time. I'm like, come on, let's go get breakfast.
I want to bounce a quarter off the sheets, Brad. I want to bounce a quarter off the sheets.
My God. And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And in fact, let's talk comics at the NCS because we have a very special show to end off the year for everybody. As you all will remember, Brad and I were nominated for a Rueben Award, a Silver Rueben Award at the National Cartoonist Society meeting in New Jersey this year. Brad and I very excitedly go out to the show. We share a room, which is much like Felix and what's the other guy on
Oscar? The one you're thinking of is Oscar. Yeah. Surprisingly, you remembered Felix's name. I wonder why that is. I wonder which one you're a little bit more like.
that got me. Anyway, the two roommates go out there to NCS. We have a grand old time. We talk to everybody from Kathy to Jim Davis. We're having a wonderful time. And this show is specifically audio clips we've gotten from that weekend. We went around to ask cartoonists one very specific question.
Yes, and it was this: do you fan to the left with your magazines or to the right? And after they stopped laughing,
oh my God,
we asked them this.
5 minutes into the show, we can let it go now. Oh my God, do you fan to the left?
This was the actual question. Because it's the most important question in creativity, period. And every time somebody gets asked it, either at a comic convention or a personal appearance or an interview, they always give a dumb answer because I think we're scared to talk about this because it's really at the heart of what makes creativity happen. We ask them, where do you get your ideas? Specifically, when there's no ideas coming, when there's nothing happening between your ears, how do you spark creativity? How do you make an idea happen? And we told them, no joke answers. You got to answer this directly. How do you make creativity happen? And we got some tremendous answers.
Yeah, and part of the brilliance of this questioning was these are people that are in the trenches of daily deadlines, even more so than Brad and I. They're doing 7 days a week, sometimes for decades on end in the case of Mike Peters. And so there are family deaths they've lived through. There are terrible illnesses they've lived through. There are divorces and mortgages falling apart. And yet they had to come up with an idea for the next day. And so this line of questioning was basically, how do you force it when nothing is coming? And in fact, life might be going against you in terms of trying to spur creativity. So really fun series of questions from different artists from all over North America who are working in the trenches of daily syndication. And let's hear from them right now.
Hey, you guys, this is Jamar Nicholas. I am a Philadelphia bred and born and buttered cartoonist. You can find me at jamarnicholas.com and also on Instagram. How do I make things happen when I'm up against the wall? You know what? There's a part of me that doesn't panic anymore. And, a lot of young cartoonists ask, where do you get your ideas? Do you just stare at a piece of paper until, blood forms on your forehead? And what I've found out is that if you just let it happen, generally it'll come to you. I think kind of stepping away from it sometimes is also helpful, but I think not forcing it always works.
Hi, I'm Isabella Bannerman, and I am the Monday artist for King Features comic strip Six Chicks, which is drawn by 6 different women, and we each draw a different day of the week. And there's 2 exciting things about Six Chicks these days. One is that we now have Bianca Eunice. She's one of the first queer, Black, African-American artists to be syndicated, and we got into the LA Times. So those are our 2 claim to fames recently. So I have a stash of old sketchbooks, and I sometimes can go through them and find things. And I also have a binder, a 3-ring binder, and it's called Roughs by Calendar. So I have it divided into Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, spring. So sometimes I'll find a good joke in there, like an old rough sketch, and then sometimes it will just get my mind going. So I'll remember, this is the kind of thing I think's funny about Thanksgiving or something like that. So, and then going back into past cartoons, I'll go through my files for 2015 or my files even for 2004, and it's like, well, that joke was ahead of its time. I think I can retool that one.
Absolutely, yeah. I've done that myself. And when those tricks don't work, is there any last stopgap measures that you do?
Sometimes when you're tired and just feeling desperate, that is actually a source of humor because you're feeling something. You're whatever, the deadline is there, right? But the impulse to make people laugh or to make yourself laugh or to get yourself out of a bad mood is still somewhere inside you, right? And so I think it's just a question of instead of focusing on the fact that there's a deadline, maybe focus on the reason you got into cartooning in the first place, which is to connect with people and make people laugh. And then it sort of shifts the feeling. Instead of being focused on the deadline, you're focused on the reason you wanted to do it in the first place.
Hi, my name is Bill Morrison. I'm mostly known for The Simpsons and Futurama. I usually look through books. I just go to my library. I've got a huge reference library that are mostly picture books. And I just kind of flip through looking for something that sparks an idea. I try not to just swipe an idea. Because sometimes I'll be looking through cartoon books and I'll see something and I'll go, oh, that's a great idea. And then I'll be like, no, everybody's going to know that I stole it from this. But sometimes you can look at something that is a funny idea and it'll spark a more original idea from you.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do.
So really taking off your editorial hat, just letting yourself stew through works that are already created kind of thing.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not, cartoon books. Sometimes it's, just pictures or, I know a lot of cartoonists say, I listen to the news and I write about something that's current, that's happening. And I do that sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't do a regular strip or anything like that. So whenever I've been up against this problem, it's normally like when I'm trying to do a cover, like when I was at Bongo, and as editor, I had to come up with cover ideas.
Yeah.
And so that's normally when I've had that problem where I just don't have an idea. What do I do? But I've done comic stories. I've never really done a newspaper strip. So I don't have that daily problem that a lot of cartoonists have of just trying to come up with something every day and being on a deadline like that. For me, it's a little more leisurely. So I have the luxury of being able to spend 3 hours looking through books in my library to try to come up with something.
I'm Jeff Keed, and I draw the Family Circus. Well, what we do with the Family Circus, I know I asked my dad this when, the years I started to work with him. And he said the easiest thing for him to do is go back. He would go back and start looking at what cartoons might have been in, his first 10 years or whatever, because as time goes on, the characters changed. So at the beginning it was more gaggy, and I don't mean gaggy throwing up. I mean gaggy like funny. He would do those gags, and so then later on it developed into more of a tug at the heart, lump at the throat type of gag. And so he could take those earlier ones and sort of delve into what was the meaning behind those to begin with, what Mommy might have said to Jeffy that caused him to say this, or what Jeffy might have said to Mommy, and that would inspire a new thought, a new idea. I mean, you can approach it from a different standpoint. What would Billy have said to around the same situation? And because the characters had different voices, you could use that voice. Or if it was a Sunday page, you could turn a daily into a Sunday by expanding on the idea. Or the opposite. It might have been a Sunday page that had 4 or 5 different gags in it. You could take one of those down and make it one gag. Or it would inspire maybe a week's worth of work. But by using that, I don't think it was a conscious thing that you kind of do. It's all of a sudden, as you see something, you go, oh, I know what he could say there, and that sets you off. Where all of a sudden you're on your way, and maybe that gag inspires another gag that has to do with outdoors or indoors or TV or wherever it is, and that's saved us many, many times in our lives, and hopefully that's still how we can come up with the gag still.
Hi, I'm Greg Cravens, and I draw the buckets. I force it. I've got a ginormous box or two of old notebooks and a lot of Post-it notes with little ideas scribbled on them. Half the time you grab out any 3 and you start comparing them, and you go, if they all fit together, oh look, I've rearranged these ideas by rearranging the Post-it notes. That gives me another idea. Or I can look at other comic strips that I don't like, that I think, boy, that was almost done well. And then you start thinking, hang on, how would I approach this thing? It was about losing your house keys, which is not what the other strip is about, really, but it happens in the strip. And you go, all right, and you can kickstart your good ideas by looking at something and going, that's not well done. And you go, I can do better than that. I can fix this one. So a lot of times it's literally just looking at comic strips and anything that hits you and you go, why in the world would you have ever done it that way? I'm going to do it better. I'm going to do it this other way. That's a go-to for, I got to knock out some stuff. It never gives you a story arc. You're going to come up with a gag if you're lucky.
But it gets you started.
But 4 or 5 gags and you're good to go. You start drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you bumble across a story arc by rearranging your Post-it notes and going, oh, that gives me another idea. Oh yeah. Then yay, you're doing that much better. I also try to keep a couple of weeks worth. I'll try to write 3 weeks worth if I can, and then I don't ink them right away. I've got layout sheets where I do all my lettering. That gives you the idea, and then you set it aside. And you want to come back to it, a week later and go, I'm going to erase this middle part. And I just realized that I thought the granddad was going to be saying this in the strip, and that's not. It's going to be the kid because it's funnier.
Right.
So,
and you let time be the editor.
Right, and that's an old Stephen King thing. He wrote this thing called On Writing, and if you read it, he says, write your book, write whatever you got, put it in a drawer, don't look at it for 6 months. You bring it back out and you go, I don't even recognize this. Did I write this? I don't think I wrote this. And then you're going, now I can be objective about it and I can edit it properly. So it's really, really, it's a luxury when you can grab a stack of stuff that you did 3 weeks ago and go, oh yeah, this can be tightened up, this can be made better. I'm, a whole different character saying stuff.
Hi, I'm John Rose, and I draw the Barney Google and Snuffy Smith comic strip for King Features. When I was in college, Mike Peters spoke to our school at James Madison University, and he showed us how he came up with ideas when he was against the wall. And it basically is an idea wheel. You kind of start off with a circle and you write maybe dog, and then you do spokes off that circle, and you would put things that relate to dogs. Then you would do spokes off those and do things maybe that relate to, like if you had dog, then you had bone, then you might do doghouse, or you could go opposite. You go the other way, like start with, instead of things that relate, maybe things that don't relate, like opposites, like dogs, cats. So that's one way to get the ideas going.
I'm Mike Lynch. I'm a magazine cartoonist, illustrator, a cartoon book editor, also adjunct faculty at New England College for the Comic Arts program. A lot of it is habit, because you're always turning things around in the back of your mind, even if you're in the line at the grocery store and that kind of thing. So there's always something cooking. But 2 things. One, it actually helps to go look at whatever you're doing. For me, it's gag cartoons. So you grab one of those dusty old books like the best cartoons in 1958, and they're of their day, but the gag construction is interesting and the drawings are really good, and that's helpful to kind of prime the pumps, as you say. But the other thing, and this is, I don't think it's a secret, but it works for me. You think about stuff that makes you angry. For instance, Wall Street Journal published a cartoon of mine because one day in real life I was behind a car, and the car was just an idiot. They were going too slow and they weren't signaling, and come on. And I really was yelling in my car. But on the back of the car were bumper stickers that had political and social things that I absolutely agreed with. So I made that into a cartoon, and it sold like the next week. So, I can't get angry at this guy because I agree with every one of his, So there you go.
Hi, I'm Mike Peters. I do Mother Goose and Grimm. I could show you a book that I usually carry of just ideas, of just things that I write down, and I don't know if I'll ever use them. They're just blips. I mean, for every cartoon, usually that I come up with, I've about 10 other ideas that I go through, and then now I'm going back and looking at them and saying, oh God, I really need to start using some of these, and so that's what I do. But I always look at a blank sheet of paper, and I always think, "Oh shit, I have no ideas. What am I going to do?" Right. And but it's part of the process, part of my process of being a cartoonist. And I would imagine many people do this. Maybe not. I just start drawing. And I'll put Grimm, let's say, into a situation, and then I don't know anything about it. And then I go over to another thing, and then I just keep drawing until I come up with something that, the thing,
Hi, I'm Mark Parisi, and I draw off the mark. One of the things that works for me, because sometimes you don't have the option to rest. You have to do it, and I have these. After doing it for so long, there's certain, I don't want to call them tropes, but I guess they're tropes. There's like movie theater tropes where there are certain animals or inanimate objects or something in the audience, and they're watching something on the screen that terrifies them. Or there are certain like things that it's like, okay, here's a starting point. I've done this different versions of this cartoon. There's still another version in there. And so I just need like some starting point. And then it's like, okay, because if I don't focus, I'm like, okay, there are clouds, there are devils, there are porcupines. I need to kind of, all right, focus. And then once I kind of narrow that focus and know there's a deadline, it always leads somewhere.
So for you, it's the restriction helps.
Yes, 100%.
The intentional restriction.
Yes. Like the bigger the options are, the harder it is to go anywhere. So if I can restrict myself and go, okay, I'm just going to focus, I'm just going to do this, then my mind can pick limitations and go, okay, here's a way to go, and just kind of go down that path.
Hi, I'm Norm Feudy. I'm most known for my comic strip retail. I also do children's books with Scholastic and HarperCollins. I think a lot of artists say this too. Rituals really are important. So, when I was writing a syndicated comic, I had a ritual for writing, because the drawing is always kind of automatic for me, and at any rate. So I would give myself 2 days with which to write. Usually it only takes one for me to, write, but I always give myself sort of that buffer. If things aren't coming, I need to give myself the permission and the room to kind of fail, to not come up with anything all day. So I can at least have a next day to start again.
That's a really interesting idea. So for you, what is that gift of the day of a failure? You know what I mean?
Well, because you have to realize some days you're just not going to come up with anything. And if you don't give yourself the room to not have any ideas one day, you're just going to stress yourself out, or you're going to settle on an idea that's not great,
Yeah.
So.
But it's building in the ritual of allowing for failure, basically, in the process.
Right, yeah. I don't give myself, it takes me a day to write a strip, so I only get a day. I'll give myself a few days to, a little bit of a buffer. But ritual is important, too, because if you sit down every Monday and say, this is my writing day, and so I'm going to sit at my table, and, it might take me half a day before I get some ideas, that's fine, but as long as you have that ritual, it can come a lot easier.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. no worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
And on that note, Brad and I want to give a huge shout out and a thank you to every cartoonist who took time out of their vacation weekend to talk to us at the Ruebens with such joy on and off the mic about their cartooning. God, what a pleasure it was. And I will say it again because we've said it before on recent shows. Give a good think to going to a Rueben weekend at some point in your life and joining the NCS because, God, there's some fun conversations to be had there around cartooning with some of the best in the world.
And like we said earlier, particularly if you're concerned with networking opportunities and just reaching out to other people who understand some of the very specific issues that cartoonists today handle, the NCS is a really, really good opportunity to do that. Keep an eye on what they're doing, particularly this year. I think we're going to see a real big push from the NCS trying to become what it needs to be in the next several decades. Take a look at what Jamar is doing with his show on YouTube that talks to cartoonists in their studio. Take a look at a lot of the stuff that they're doing right now. You're going to see some big changes. I think this is a great time to join the NCS.
Yeah, I think this, if I'm pronouncing it right, this is really the sort of chrysalis stage, I think, for the NCS in that changing from what it was for most of its history, which was kind of an old boys network of the richest syndicated cartoonists, to becoming, I think, something much broader and frankly more fun, I think, and more useful, more utility in the NCS in the years to come. So I'm excited to see what it'll become. And but I want to ask you, Brad, at the end of this show, you are now going in, probably coming up on year 25 of your cartooning, I would guess.
Yeah, getting close. This will be the 24th year we're going into.
So, as a man with a few years under his boots there in cartooning, that made no sense as a visual metaphor.
Years under his boots.
A man with a few years under his boots, ladies and gentlemen. If you wanted to know who writes professionally, Dave Kellett, professional writer over here. So, Brad, as a cartoonist with a few years under your boots, how do you force it when you don't have an idea and nothing is coming and there's nothing on the horizon and maybe life is conspiring against you? You have active bad news in your personal life. How do you force it?
Yeah, well, listen, I've got a couple of thoughts on that. The first one is every time I've ever faced writer's block, when I look back, it's always been more of a crisis of confidence than it's been a crisis of content. All right. Now, I'll tell you what I mean by that. When I look back in my sketchbook, I find that I actually had a lot of ideas. I just didn't have the confidence to take one of those ideas and work from it. And what I finally did, and this is where I'm a real big fan of deadlines, because I think deadlines force this. And this is something that I talk about with my storytelling students every semester, is that ideas are worthless. And what really counts is the execution of the idea. Now, you've heard me say that on the show before. Here's what it means. It means that you take one of those ideas and you say, okay, this is the idea I'm going to do. And then you start working on how to make that idea work, how to find something interesting, how to find something funny, something compelling, something that goes to whatever you're writing. How are you going to do that? Then it becomes not so much of a searching function where you're like, oh, what am I going to do? I could do astronauts, or I could do apes. And that's just the A's, right? Or I could do anything. But what am I going to do? Well, that's an unanswerable question. But if you say, oh, okay, today I'm going to write about astronauts and apes at the grocery store. Now, that's a dumb idea, but they're all dumb. Every idea is dumb.
Yeah.
If I decide now to take that and how am I going to make that story work? How am I going to make that punchline work? How am I going to make that joke work? Now, instead of searching, I'm problem solving. And searching can go on for hours, but problem solving gets very focused, very direct, very quickly. So when I am in that situation, one of the first things I try to do is realize that it's a crisis of confidence and not of content. And I try to just say, okay, this is what we're working on today. Commit to it, and then start problem solving. That's the first one. The second one that goes right hand in hand with that is that another thing that happens when I'm brain locked in front of my sketchbook is that I realize in the moment. Now, this isn't something I go back. You can't go back and see this in hindsight, but I've learned to recognize it in the moment. It's just the opposite. Nothing is on the page. And I know what you're saying. Well, of course, Brad, you're facing writer's block. Of course, nothing's on the page. You don't get it. You don't understand. I haven't even put the pencil on the paper yet. Right.
Right.
And so what happens is, like, I'm so locked up that I can't even put a mark on the page.
Yeah.
How do you face that? Well, you start putting marks on the pages, and the best way to get unlocked for me, along with what I just said, would be just to start drawing things, just to start drawing images, just to start drawing whatever comes to mind. Even though they're really horrible, they're really dumb, they're poorly composed, there's nothing good about them. But this one that you draw is going to bring you to the next little vignette that you're going to draw, which is going to bring you to the next. And eventually your creative process is going to take over, and you are going to come to something that you're like, oh, I could do this. Right. And now so the other thing is to just start drawing, or if you're writing, just start writing. And by the way, the same thing applies to writing. Just start writing sentences, paragraphs, even though you're probably going to throw all of them out. I had, again, one of my students, he gave me a story. I said, oh my God, this was, the old joke, it's such a bad restaurant. The food is so bad and such small portions. I said, this is like that, except that the story was not very good, and you gave me a whole lot of it, right? You needed to edit. You needed to edit this story down. There's a good story in there somewhere. You just have to cut through to get to it. And he says, I know that, but I put all that work into all those sentences, and I didn't want to delete them. I said, I get it. Oh my God, I so get it. I get it. You put the work in, but you got to realize that the rest of the work is not just writing the sentences, but knowing which ones have to go, which ones have to be deleted to get you to the good place. And so that's everything that I just said in terms of just start drawing images also applies to writing. Just start writing things. Just start writing sentences. Even though it's going to get you to maybe it's going to take you a while. Eventually, it's going to get you to a better place. But you got to make that first mark. And when you're sitting there staring out the window and you look down and you haven't put a mark in your book, or you haven't put a single word up there on the screen, you know what you got to do. You got to start. Journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. And when it comes to an artist, 999 of those steps are probably going to be in the wrong direction. But you got to do them before you get that one. So that's how I try to think about creativity. It's about realizing that it's a crisis, a crisis of confidence
and of language.
And it's about and of communication. the other 3 C's. but it's about confidence, and it's about making that first mark, which is, by the way, also a confidence issue. If you're sensing a theme here, I think at the heart of most creative problems is confidence. I don't want to do the wrong thing. I think I'm not worth it. I don't think I can do it. And the only way you get past it is to just start doing it. So that's my thoughts on how to jumpstart creativity. But more importantly, what I want to hear from you, Dave, is how do you make creative things happen?
Well, I much like Brad, I think confidence is, especially with Drive, with a longer form story where, to quote a terrible Star Wars movie, I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it, is that I often know what I need to do in Drive. But like Brad said, there's sort of a lack of confidence in what the next step should be, or how I get there, what steps do I take to get to that journey, part of the journey, And so usually in long form storytelling, I will agree with Brad, it's a lack of confidence. And usually, like Brad, if I can do the sort of mental Metamucil of just getting unstuck by just starting on something, and then it becomes problem solving and not this sort of ephemeral, like 1,000 things are possible and therefore nothing is possible in terms of lack of choosing. Sometimes just choosing, like Brad said, and then trying to execute it, your problem solving muscle kicks in, and it's a much better process for you creatively. So there's that. With short form, because Sheldon is humor-based, I often find that the writing block there comes from, honestly, a lack of joy in my own heart at that moment.
Yeah.
That if I'm feeling laughter and joy-filled, and something will spark with me, you know? Yeah. And so often the ways that I find myself out of that dark spot where I know I have to do a Sheldon, but I'm not feeling joy-filled and there's no sparks coming that are around joy or humor, is I will often reread past me to sort of rediscover who my own voice, who I am and what my voice is, and what did I spark on in the past that maybe there's something iterative that can be, or at least parallel, or just reminding myself that I can be funny, am funny. And so to Brad's point, again, it's a little bit of confidence there too. But reading past me, reading people that I know bring me joy, like a Douglas Adams, or watching a little bit of Mel Brooks or something like that, or talking to a friend that genuinely makes me laugh, like Brad Geiger, which this podcast over the last 5 years, maybe 6 years now, has even on the non-writers room episodes, has actually sparked a lot of ideas, because I come away from this show a little bit lighter in my step, a little bit more spring, and like bing, 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 knowing that I have a joy in my heart. I can be funny. I've made Brad laugh. He's made me laugh. And therefore my brain is a little bit more willing to write jokes and a little bit better at it, you know? Yeah. And so even that is sort of getting past a crisis of confidence. Just talking with a friend that's making me laugh is just a reminder that I am funny, can be funny, know what funny is, know how to write funny. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. And it's kind of heartening too, that like one thing that we found after compiling all of these answers is that there's not one way to do it. There's not a right way and a wrong way. Right. You know, there's not a method. We heard from so many different people who gave us so many different answers that the truth of the matter is that you've got to find what works for your creative process. Right. You've got to find how your brain works, how your creativity sparks most effectively. And the good news is there's a whole bunch of ideas giving you some places to start. Mm-hmm. And chances are maybe someday you're going to be in a position where the microphone is in front of you and you're going to have something completely new and unique to share as well. Just do me a favor. Don't give a joke answer. I really feel strongly about that joke, because it goes, where do you get your ideas comes to the heart of what it means to be a creative person. So just do me that favor. No joke answers. And Dave, this is not a joke. As we go into our 7th year of podcasting together, thank you so much. You touched on it, but I just want to say it. This has been an absolute joy to do week after week with you. And I think it's made me a better cartoonist. And if I'm, without getting too serious, a better person. So thank you so much for 6 years of podcasting amazement. And I'm looking forward to what we come up with in the 7th.
Well, I agree with you. This 6 years has been a joy for me. And I want to say that as we exit 2023, I want you all to be like Brad Geiger entering a hotel room. Just take your forearm and swipe across 2023. Just get all that off your emotion, all that emotional cruft, to just get it out of your heart. We're starting 2024 strong. We're going to go into a great year.
That is the best advice you can get. If there's something in your way, you put your arm down and you get it out of the way. Because chances are you make room for your Slurpee and for your 48 pack of Slim Jims, and by God, you claim your space in 2024. That's right. You know you've got worth, and you just sit right down and know darn well that out of those 48 pack, 24 of them are going to go to somebody else. And with that, I'll tell you that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my ever delightful friend for whom I am so excited to go into another year of podcasting with. He is the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, with whom it has been a joy. The co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And I would recommend Andy's music wholeheartedly. One of my favorite artists. He's over at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever wonderful Matt Woodard, who we thank for such a wonderful year in 2023. Great editing of all of our foibles and flaws and falsehoods in terms of cutting out all the cruff. So thank you, Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
Yeah, you might even see Matt puts his hand down on those mistakes and just swipes them right off.
Just swipes them, making room for a Slurpee. That's right.
That's right. If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode. And if you're listening to Spotify, take a minute. Go over, give us those 5 stars. It's going to help us so much, and it's going to make you feel better, too.
And I'll tell you what, to make your 2024 even better, do join us over at patreon.com/Comic Lab. I'm so excited for you joining us. I'm going to say it twice, and I might even pronounce it right this second time around. Patreon.com/Comic Lab.
Oh, listen to that.
See? I know what I'm doing.
Nice.
I'm a pro.
Who says you can't be taught? We love talking to everybody. They were all delights. But was there one that kind of stood out in your mind when we were getting these interviews?
Oh, God. In terms of energy and joy, Mike Peters, by far, like head and shoulders.
Yes.
I want that level of energy in my 80s. He is a ball of joy and like a little ball lightning bouncing around the room. He was a great conversationalist and so exciting to talk to.
If he walks down the street, you'd never know there's an 80-year-old man walking. If you talk to him, he doesn't talk like an 80-year-old man. He's a youthful guy, and you're right, just full of happiness. Like I said on the show, when you told him that I was nominated for an award, he sat there and gushed about me. He has no idea who I am, but just the fact that I had been nominated, I must have been a good person. And he made me feel like a million. It's the closest people like you and I are ever going to get to a real conversation with Fred Rogers. You know, it was that kind of thing. You are great. I'm so happy to be standing here talking to you. I walked away. I felt like I was 8 foot tall.
Yeah, and Mike Peters also one of the funniest guys alive. So if he wanted to, he could eviscerate us conversationally. But what a joy to talk to. Anyway, so if you get a chance at an NCS Rueben weekend, my God, pull Mike Peters aside because that's a conversation you're going to want to have.